Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Florida Chamber Foundation's Florida Horizon. I'm Tony Carvajal, the Executive Vice President of the Florida Chamber Foundation, and joining me today is Robin Safley, the Executive Director of Feeding Florida. And Robin, we were just talking about food insecurity and its tie into prosperity and jobs and the ability to learn. I want to dive a little bit deeper into this. Tell me a little bit about the organization that you work for, Feeding Florida, what it does, and maybe even how we can help you.
Absolutely. So Feeding Florida, we changed our name. So we used to be the Florida Association of Food Banks. And so we're made up of 13 Feeding America food banks. So we're affiliated with Feeding America at the national level. And it is just an affiliation. They bring a lot of resources to the table. And we cover the entire state. So every county in the state has a distribution. So if you think about it, historically, food banks really bring the food in. They're the aggregator and a distribution model. And then we work with about 2,500 not-for-profit agencies that are in the community, embedded in the community, not, faith-based, United Ways, YMCAs, and we distribute food to them so that they then are interacting with the clientele. And in some instances, we do a mobile distribution for those areas that may not have infrastructure, and especially as we increase our produce program, which I'd love to share with you about, because I think that's really important. We are very committed as an organization to bringing more healthy, nutritious food to those in need.
Let's talk about that. I mean, because there's different types of food. Obviously, there's one situation where you don't have food, and then there's another situation where you have food, but it's the wrong food.
Right.
So that produce program, tell me what you're doing to try and get healthier foods into the right places.
Yeah, so it's exciting. As I've indicated before, we are a very robust agriculture state, as you know. And if you estimate that about 16% of all produce grown never makes it into the supply chain, it either stays in the field just because maybe markets shift, or it's cold at the processing because it doesn't meet the standards for retail sale. But it's perfectly edible. So we work with growers getting that product out of the field. And if you look at Florida, that what could possibly be available is between 700 and 900 million pounds of produce on an annual basis. And what I think is interesting, as I indicated, there's about 3.2 million individuals who are food insecure. If I was going to try and attempt to get every one of them a serving of fruit and vegetables every day, all I would need to do is source 104 million pounds of food. And we are sourcing it, and we help defray some of the pick and pack costs. And the legislature and the Commissioner of Agriculture always put us in their budget to help defray that cost. We're getting produce around 8 to 10 cents a pound, and then distributing out to those in need. And we couple that with the University of Florida and some nutrition classes so that we're really teaching people about the importance of that food and also how to prepare it.
What you're doing is amazing in terms of the distribution and making sure that we have healthier food. Let's talk about the intersection and why this matters, because in a previous session, you really highlighted that this impacts learning and jobs and the ability to get through the day. Tell me a little bit about what you have found.
Well, if you look at the health care cost on chronic disease that is just driving that cost up, the number one way to combat that is prevention. And so getting individuals who are marginalized that healthy food really stabilizes their environment. It decreases that chronic disease, can maintain their diabetes. You have a more productive workforce. In addition to the retraining needs and some of those issues and children coming up and learning and reading, it's imperative that they have a nutritious foundation. And so I really do think almost when you look at poverty and you look at all of the intricate parts of that, housing and transportation and jobs, I almost see food as that common denominator, that fundamental base that someone needs in order to have prosperity in those other sectors.
Yeah, and I think that if you don't mind coming back, we want to continue this conversation and talk about how we can continue this, because we've got about 21 million people in Florida right now, growing to 26 million people. Very diverse, aging and young populations, workers, and what you're doing is absolutely essential to guaranteeing that. But I also want to talk about how it intersects with others. If you'll come back and join us on the next edition of the Florida Chamber Foundation's Florida Horizon, you'll hear a little bit more about what you can do to help with food security and advance and secure Florida's future.